So we've got Clare Jones here, bit of a Welsh netball legend. She's in her fifth season with Celtic Dragons now. She made her debut for Wales in 2016, has played in the English Division 1 for Hupplecote as well. And to top it all off, is also doing her doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Exeter. Okay, so you talk about someone who can get that balance between studies and sports. Okay, here's your person. Look no further. So Claire, what I'd love to do is just kind of hear about your career. You know, how it's gone through you, starting from school and just sport, and then you know, obviously specializing in netball, making it all the way up to the Wales senior squad.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So I guess really, I've always been a really active child. So I've always I started as a swimmer, an athlete. So I fell in love with the track pretty early days. And then it was around when I was 8 and I first saw netball being played in primary school. And it immediately trumped anything that I was doing at the time, and immediately just became involved in the school team. That quickly spiraled into a club team in Swansea, a club called Treforys. And then again, I think I was always just very active, very passionate about sport. I then also became involved actually with hockey. So throughout my teens, I was actually balancing hockey, netball, athletics, swimming and tennis. So I represented county in each of those. And then it was starting to get to a point where decisions had to be made. So hockey and netball became my two top sports. And right through to the age of 16, I was still representing at county level and started to make a bit of a break into the pathway in the Welsh in both hockey and netball. And then obviously there's school and there's work that you have to balance. So between trying to get that balance right, it was again another tough decision of, you know, was it hockey, was it netball? And even now, I don't forget that feeling of when I first saw netball. I remember the year 5s and 6s playing it in the schoolyard after school. And I was in year 4 at the time. And you just don't forget that feeling of seeing that sport and thinking, yeah, that's absolutely what I want to be doing. And that inevitably was what made me decide netball over hockey. So I went with it and I went through the Welsh pathway. So back in that day, it's all changed now, but there were hubs. I became part of the South Wales hub, which then led me to the path of going to under 21s. And then things took a bit of an unexpected turn, and I was experiencing a severe amount of pain in my lower limbs, so in both my legs, and I couldn't run for more than 7 minutes without kind of not being able to feel my muscles or my feet, and it was just severe pain. And a lot of people just sort of wrote me off, just sort of said, oh, it's severe shin splints, take time off, do what you need to do. But then obviously you've got people always around the corner vying for your place. So that had a huge impact then on my selections for under 21s and for me as an individual in the Welsh setup. And then what happened was, after investigations, I was diagnosed with compartment syndrome in both legs. And I was very much told there and then by a surgeon to not really expect to play competitively, certainly not internationally, and certainly not Super League. And I guess as a sort of 17-year-old, you kind of just... There was a bit of acceptance, you know, they know best. I've got a surgeon with much more experience than me, telling me that, you know, that's that really. So I just made the decision to park things where they are. I got into the University of Exeter to study psychology, and I considered just perhaps picking up hockey again, just for fun, to sort of re-fall in love with sport. Things had gotten quite intense. And I got to Exeter and it was a very different story. I did trial for the netball team, and again it was still that pain, but I'd spent the summer just building up tolerance to the pain, kind of training myself to manage the pain. I did a lot of physio, changing my running technique, and that just seemed to pay off. And then I had a coach who just saw more than an injury of me, and importantly I had a physio who really just saw me as a bit of a challenge, and was sort of, my coach really kind of had my back and was like, we want this girl on court, you need to get her onto court. And so the 4 years that I had in Exeter, so I did both my undergrad and my master's at Exeter, and it was hard work to kind of maintain constant physio. Obviously you're there to achieve your degree and my master's, but to also then play quality sport. So I played for the first team for my 4 years there. I captained them for 2 years. By the end then of my third year, I was selected to play in the England universities team. My family, I'm not sure how they felt about me wearing an England dress before a Welsh dress, but they obviously, no doubt, very proud. And then that also led me to have an opportunity to be in the Team Bath Super League long squad in my fourth year. So those 4 years were huge in terms of my development, but also massively overcoming something that I thought wouldn't be possible pre-university. I graduated, came home. I knew I always wanted to work in the mental health field. Always warned how competitive clinical psychology is as a field. There's currently so to be a clinical psychologist, there's only around 20 courses throughout the UK, and each of those courses vary in terms of how many people are let onto the course. So it varies from 11 per year to 25 per year. So highly competitive, but again, as a sports person, you'll all know that competition comes very naturally to us. So I spent several years just building up experience in the mental health field. And then I also trialed for the Welsh squad. I was unsuccessful. And so I spent 2 years in the Welsh Premiership League. Again, building experience, trying to build a name for myself, getting to know myself. I think that something that I really noticed was different styles. I'd spent 4 years developing a very English style of netball, which suited the area that I was in. That no longer fitted in where I was, and I'd lost that Welsh flair that I'd perhaps gone to England with. So it was really challenging to try and find, well, actually, who am I and what do I offer? Because I now have skills from both England and Wales, but what is it that makes me stand out, and how can I utilise both those areas to the best of my ability? So I guess I had 2 years of just really solidifying just me as an athlete. And then I got picked up in 2015 for Celtic Dragons and Wales. And then as Mr. Cobb said, my luck kind of took a turn. I achieved both my caps in 2016, remained with the Welsh squad. 2018, I took a bit of a break from Celtic Dragons. Again, not an easy decision, and a lot of things perhaps not in my control. which I think would be important to talk about a bit later on. But it was probably time to kind of re-establish myself as an athlete, check in with, what are my strengths and what do I actually need to work on in order to be playing at the best of my ability. Goals change. So currently, my goal is next year for Commonwealth Games. And it's asking those questions. What do I need to do right now to put me in the best position to be going for those spots? And in 2018, I didn't feel that Celtic Dragons was the right place for me. So I made the decision to join Hucklecote. Some of you will know perhaps of the England Premiership League, which is just the step down from Super League, but obviously all us Super League girls will be attached to one of those Premiership teams. So I've just sort of had 2 years with them, and I've re-signed then for Celtic Dragons this year, and I've remained in the Welsh squad. So, that's a whistle-stop tour, I suppose.
That's fantastic. It's such an interesting journey. How it's taking you to kind of different countries, playing for different teams, and different coaches, and that really ties into, I think, a huge question. Kind of how important is it to not only in netball to play kind of more than one position, but to experience kind of as many different sports. You talked about playing, was it county level netball, tennis, hockey? Which ones have I missed?
Swimming and athletics.
So county standard in 5 different sports. And how do you feel kind of having that exposure to different sports, and then different positions within netball? How do you feel that's kind of helped you develop your game?
I think it's been crucial, and I think it's in terms of definitely having a mix of an individual sport versus a team sport. Whereas I'd love to still pick up a tennis racket in the summer, and go for a knockabout. But for me, there's just something about a team sport that I really identify with, and it brings the best out of me. I love having a team to work for. And they're my motivation to make me a better player. What can I do to better myself in order to get the best out of my teammates, in order to get the best as a whole? So I think just having those experiences, but then also I think reflection is huge, because it does help you learn, and it's okay to kind of take your time to make decisions. I think there was a time and I was unsuccessful in a squad selection, and actually on reflection I thought, did I prep well enough for it? Probably not as well as I thought I was doing at the time. I think you've got your end goals, but then something that I think I've made the mistake in the past of is just focusing on that end goal. That's something I want, so that's something that's going to happen. Actually, what I've learned from that is you need to have your mini goals. You have to constantly kind of check in with yourself and think, okay, what is going to help me get to that end product? And it is, as kind of cliche as it sounds, it is a journey, and it is those reflective skills. It's being flexible, it's being versatile, it's having relationships with your coaches. It's having honest conversations, which are quite frightening sometimes to do. And I've not had sometimes environments where I've felt that I could have those honest relationships with coaches. But again, through learning and through reflecting on various conversations that I've had, I am now at a far better place to know, well, actually, it's better to have a conversation than to not have a conversation if it's going to help you achieve what you need for yourself.
Mm. And touching on that point there, talking about kind of like courageous conversations, because you had to have one with your new coach, didn't you, quite recently? Hey, and how did you kind of a bit of a two-pronged question, but how did you kind of find the courage to have that, because like you said, new coach can be a bit nerve-wracking. And then what's the benefit of developing that player coach relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, you're right. So, recently, I've never worked with this Celtic Dragons coach before. And when I've been playing my best is when I have had the best relationship with my coach. So my previous Welsh coach, her name is Julie Hornwig. She was incredible at really nailing what your self-identity was as an athlete, and really she made us hone in on our strengths as an athlete. So when we were put onto court, we knew exactly why we were put on court, but importantly, when we weren't put on court, we knew exactly why we weren't. But then we also were able to say, okay, I didn't get on because I'm not this type of marker, or my opposition was more agile and I needed a different style of defense, for example. What am I working on this week in training? How can I improve that? So when it comes to next week's selection, you'll think twice. For me, my goal is always to try and be playing, try and improve, and to ensure that I'm at the best of my game. And when you don't have the opportunity to take to court, it is really important to have those conversations, and approach is huge, and I think getting across that it's for yourself, and it's because you want to be the best athlete that you can possibly be. I've only ever sort of been met with open arms then to have with those coaches, because they're there to help you and they're there to encourage you. And for me, when I've coached, when I've had those conversations with people, it excites you because you think, okay, this person's engaged, this person is ready to compete, they want to get better, they want to compete for a bib, let's work with them. And again, I think the difference is, so in mid-court, so I can play either wing attack, wing defence, centre, but I have had to be very flexible. So I probably did go to university thinking I am a wing defence. And you rock up at trials and you say, I'm a wing defence. And a coach turns around to you and goes, no, you're not. And you think, well, I am actually. And that flexibility of sort of trusting your coach, have those conversations. Well, what if they're putting you in a place that you're not familiar with, or you disagree with, ask them, what do you see me there? What strengths do I bring to you in that position? And the best thing that I've been taught throughout my years in sport is to be flexible. And if you're put at wing attack, centre, wing defence, it's for a reason. And the belief that coaches put in you to do a job there is one of the most important things. So it's less about, well, I'm not playing in the position that I want to or I like the most. It's, okay, that coach really sees me as something there. So let's go for it. Let's know what I can bring there. Let's sort of work on my strengths there, and do that bib justice. And as well, I think when you're on the court, it's an opportunity that someone else isn't having. So you've got to enjoy it as well.
I could literally chat about this all day. This is I love it. It's so interesting to hear this from both a player coach perspective. Just before we go on to Miss Miller, Mr. Doubler, Mr. Bird, have you guys got any questions from the students early on?
Yeah, shall I go first, Mr. D?
Go for it, Mr. Bird. Go for it.
Yeah, we've had some great questions flying in. Some of the questions I think have already been sort of answered. So if you have sent a question in and I don't ask it, I apologise. One question here from one of our aspiring netballers, sort of talking currently about sort of the Super League. You know, who do you sort of admire in the Super League? Do you have sort of a current player that you most admire and why? And then also going back to sort of your earlier years, who was your hero and who sort of inspired you in the world of sport?
Great questions. So I think my two standouts in the Super League currently are, of course, Serena Guthrie. Just class, oozes class on court, and then Liana Leota, just someone who is just so skilled, so professional. Both of them have the utmost professionalism, hard workers both on and off the court. But what I really love about them is when they are on court, they are their team's biggest fans. They are constantly talking to their team players. And I think, sometimes it's really hard in games when things aren't going your way. It's really easy to hone in on the things that aren't going your way. But something that you notice, particularly with Serena and Liana, is they will constantly be keeping their team motivated, picking out anything good that's happening and really bigging that up. And it obviously shows in the Super League, particularly with Team Bath, that celebration of success is really working for them this year. And then I suppose my growing up, it has been a player called, she doesn't play anymore sadly, but she was an Australian called Renee Ingles. And if anyone I would recommend YouTubing her if you can. She was just a relentless defender. She was a wing defence, and she just the most dogged defence that you could possibly imagine, that just did not stop. And then, of course, the recently retired Laura Langman, who, again, just the greatest of all time. She's someone that can play wing attack, centre, wing defence. She's had her time where she's been predominantly a wing D. She's been shifted predominantly a wing attack, and then coming to her end of her career, she was predominantly a centre. So again, just one of the world greatest netballers, just having that flexibility to just basically be put where the coach asks and do a pretty all right job.
Amazing, thank you, Claire. I've got another question here from Eloise. We've been talking a lot as a group and as a school and as sort of a sports scholars group about core values and behaviours. As an individual and as a team, what are your core values and sort of core behaviours that you sort of hang on to? What are your non-negotiables as a team and as an individual?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. So accountability is one. Firstly, for yourself. And again, I think that links into behaviours. So how, when the session starts at 6:30, for example, are you turning up at 6:30, or are you turning up there 6:15, ready to go for 6:30? That then obviously gives you the permission then to hold others accountable. So if you are one of those people who are abiding by the behaviours, abiding by the values, then it's really important to hold your teammates accountable as to why they're perhaps not fulfilling those behaviours that's been agreed. Professionalism is a non-negotiable for me, both on and off the court. I think we get a lot of social media talks about what we put out there, being really just professional in terms of how we present ourselves, what we want to put out there of ourselves. And also just in terms of, communication with other people, what you do on court, whether, when you're communicating with officials, it is, you treat it like a job. Unfortunately, netball is getting there in terms of its professionalism. But if we want it to go and be seen as it is rugby, football, we have to hold it up there as a professional sport, and that means behaving professionally. I think honesty is up there for me, again, and that's working both ways. I've certainly had to have a few honest chats with myself in terms of, when there have been hurdles and deselections have happened, actually, before looking elsewhere and looking at the person who's been selected over me, have I really done all that I possibly can? There have been things in my control where I can put my hands up and say yes, and actually selections were out of my control. that's something that I have to deal with. But there have been times, and actually, no, I haven't done everything that I could possibly do in order to put me in the best position for selection. So I think honesty is a massive one for me. And then I think particularly in the team environment, that sense of family, you spend so much time with your coaches, your teammates, your management. You've got to create a family environment. It's got to be a safe environment. And I certainly believe there's room in an elite environment to have both compassion and competition. That's something that I'm really firm about. And it is having that sense of empathy with one another, but still being able to, again, hold those accountabilities and have those high standards.
Brilliant. Amazing answer. Thank you, Claire. One more from me with regards to sort of the physicality of netball.
Yeah.
And I think sort of year on year, season on season, it becomes more physical. You know, the game is ever changing, as you know, the world of sport does. How do you keep on top of your sort of physical training? You know, you're an incredibly busy person. You know, you're driving here, there, and everywhere, up and down the country, combining, you know, all the things you do. How do you keep on top of your physical training, sort of pre-competition, but also during competition?
Yeah, so pre-competition is probably where we hammer the sort of physicality the most. Personally, that's one of my favorite parts of the game, is how physical it's getting. I love the contested game. So when I train, that's an element that I really enjoy training. So yeah, sort of pre-competition, that's where we kind of overload. And then during competition, it's more just sort of maintenance, reactive work, stability work. But I guess routine is really the key thing there. We'll have 2 S&C sessions a week. We'll have 2 court sessions a week. And then we'll probably we'll obviously have a game at the minute, either 1 or 2 games a week. And then we'll be topping up with conditioning then over the week. So that could be perhaps three conditioning sessions a week. And it's just finding that balance of what works for you. So at the moment, I'm working full time as part of my doctorate. So, you know, does morning suit me? If I know that I've got a bit of a hard day on placement, am I really going to want to then do a session after work, or is it going to help me de-stress, forget about work and concentrate on netball? It's really trying to find what works for you. And some weeks will look different than others, and that's okay. But it's more knowing, okay, this is what I feel like in the mornings. This is what I feel like when I'm feeling stressed or run down. I know I've got to get a session out the way, but where is it in the weeks or the days that I can get the best out of myself?
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. That's fantastic. If I hand over to Mr. Dublin now, I'm sure Mr. Dublin's got some questions.
Is there anything else to ask, Mr. Bird? Only joking. Some fantastic questions from the students there. Thank you, Mr. Bird. That's brilliant. Claire, I've got a few here. I think you've kind of answered a few already, but one was around setbacks, and you talked about getting back from injury and stuff like that. So I wanted to touch on, we talk about within our performance behaviours about being mentally strong, mentally resilient, you know, and obviously you've talked about the physical side just a minute ago, Mr. Bird. How important is the mental side of elite sport with regards to maintaining that level week in, week out, with all the other things that's going on? So we can touch on that, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, of course. Again, a great question. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think it's more important than that physical side. I think having had my physical setbacks, if it wasn't for a positive mindset and a positive attitude towards getting back, my comebacks wouldn't have been half as strong as what they have been. It was in 2019, and Wales hosted a summer test series, and I got selected, and the day of selection I broke my hand. So that ruled me out for the summer test series, and that was really tough to take. I really thought that I was in good form, and I was excited, and it was the first selection under the new coach. So you really felt as if you proved your worth to your new coach. And we had another competition in 8 weeks' time. And so there was no chance that I wasn't getting back for that. And I guess I look back now and I kind of had two options. I could have said, well, that's me done for the season and that's all right. I'll have the summer off and, it's fine. Or that motivation of going, no, I can get back for this. And that's my motivation. And you just kind of click in. And again, I think it goes back to those mini goals as, yes, you've got your main outcome, but it's having that organization of, okay, what are my mini goals to help me get to that end product?
Brilliant. That's brilliant, Claire. And I love the way you talked about reflection earlier, and reflecting on yourself and the goal setting and having those goals to help you get over and overcome setbacks. And what's lovely is the common theme from all the elite athletes we've spoken to over the last couple of weeks is how you put a positive slant on everything. You turn a negative into a positive. I just love that, and it's just so refreshing to hear, and it's such a good learning for our students listening.
Yeah.
Not to make things into too much of a big thing, reflect on it, and then move forward and come back stronger. This question is from me, Claire, and I kind of touched on this before we kind of started. This is from a coaching point of view. Look, netball is an awesome game. The speed, watching it, I've tried to play it, not very well, but the speed at which it's played, the movement, the passing, and something I'm really interested in from a coaching perspective is movement off the ball. And I think rugby players and lots of other sports, hockey, we could all learn a lot from watching netball and the amazing movement off the ball. And I think there's room. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on whether there's room for off the ball coaches in sport moving forward. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, and do you know what? For me, it's so pleasing to see, because I think it's taken netball as a sport to get that recognition, and it's not just a pass and catch game. The work that's done off the ball is just it's really smart, it's really tactical, and as I sort of briefly mentioned, and I will try and find the article, the South African rugby coach, so not this World Cup, the World Cup before, spent time looking at the South African netball team before their World Cup in order to try and enhance their vision of the ball. So to see space wider, there are some lovely opportunities that I've not played rugby for many years, but you can see the opportunities to run on flies, there is opportunity there, I think, to kind of, and we have actually in the past done sessions with rugby players, and there has been overlap there, definitely.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant to hear, and I think the crossover between sports is so, especially at the top end, you're looking at those fine margins. Everyone's just as fit, everyone's kind of mentally strong. It's those fine margins where you find the extra little bit, but that's a great answer, and thank you. I'm going to hand over to our head of netball now, Miss Miller. I'm sure has got some fantastic questions as well from a netball perspective, and but thank you, Claire. It was brilliant. Cheers.
My pleasure.
Yeah, hi Claire. So great to have you here. I think leading on from sort of what we've been talking about, it'd be really nice. We discussed the progression of netball and sort of where it's been going, and obviously this is the first year ever that netball, the Super League's being exposed in the way it is, on TV for us, through YouTube, which is obviously free, that everyone can get access to, and then on Sky Sports as well. And I guess my first question to you is, how has that changed the preparation for the Super League season? And has it had an impact on your squad particularly? And how have you prepared differently, knowing that sort of every game is exposed to the wider public?
Yeah, I think we've all kind of acknowledged it as a massive platform to increase the status of netball. This has never happened to us before. We've kind of always just concentrated on getting the mass supporters in a venue. And again, it was one of those things, you know, a door closes, another opens. And actually the fact that we've got all of our games being streamed, that's huge for the sport. And particularly now, you know, there's not a lot going on. So we would like to hope, and we would like to think that actually people are tuning in and people are perhaps thinking, oh, what's this all about? So by the time that we are able to have some crowds back, hopefully, we would like to expect that we'd have some new fans coming and joining and seeing it in, because I don't think that the TV does the sport justice, if I'm being honest. I would urge anyone who hasn't watched a live game of netball to please go and watch it live, because it's a different sport altogether from the screen onto the live version. But in terms of how we've prepped, I don't personally think we've given it too much attention. Our squad is pretty young. And I think we've had to do a lot of management in terms of prepping them for their first Super League season. So we've kind of not given it that much attention, and actually we've kind of just used it as, well, that's our video analysis sorted, you know, and which is obviously going to be very useful to us. So yeah, no, it's been very good, very good.
And how important do you think it is, you know, putting yourselves in the shoes of our students, how important do you think it is to be watching netball and actually, you know, tuning into the Super League or sort of any exposure to any of the netball that's on and available online now?
Oh, I think it's so important, you know, whether you're a footballer, rugby player, an athlete, swimmer, netballer, hockey player, I think the sport can offer so much, as we just touched upon, in terms of ball handling skills, team morale, team work ethics amongst one another. And I'm part of a squad that you've got girls who are just working so hard for one another, and you can see that there's only 7 in a team that's able to take the court, and so to be able to see those workings together, that partnerships, the unit partnerships, I think it comes across really strongly as a sport. The footwork, the agility, all those skills can be taken into your rugby, your football, and various other sports. So I might be biased, and I'm probably coming across as quite biased, but I do think it is a sport that's up there in terms of how other sports can learn from it.
No, I completely agree. Obviously, I'm going to be biased. Yeah. So, yeah, preaching to the right person here. But something else, touching back to one of the questions you sort of covered earlier, you were talking about Serena and Liana. Like, obviously, being a centre court player myself, I couldn't agree more. But what you're not giving yourself enough credit for is obviously watching you play. You know, you are actually playing against those players. You're in centre court, so it's not as if they're on the same court as you. You're actually going up against these players, and obviously doing amazingly. But how do you prepare for that in terms of, you know, you're saying you admire them, and I know that a lot of the girls and guys here on the call, they play against the same players. You know what it's like, you're playing against the same school regularly, and you'll have those players that you think, oh, I remember them. And how do you prepare yourself to play against someone that you maybe have played against before, admire, or has given you, you know, a run for your money? How do you prepare for that going into a competition or a game against them again?
Yeah, do you know what? I think this has actually taken me several years to perhaps find a strategy that works for me, because I think it is really important. Something that works really well for me is to depersonalize them. So off court, you know, I'd say hello to Serena, I'd say hello to Liana, but actually when I'm preparing, they're the centre for Bath, they're the wing attack for Stars. I try and depersonalize them as much as I can. I really hone in on my own strengths. So what am I good at? What do I offer there? Why is it that my team need me to work as I do at that position? And I really just try and focus on myself. I know a little bit about obviously what they offer, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are. But I think actually having that space to think, well, I've got this bib on my back now, and it's because, you know, I'm defensively strong, I can create turnover, I'm accurate on a feed. And those are, say, for example, 3 things that I will go into the game thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do well, and I'm going to focus on my job. So I think that's something that really has helped me over the years.
Yeah, I think as well, I sort of picked up on something you said earlier, Claire, and you said Mr. Cobb, sorry, might agree about luck for you. Just listening to your story, there's no luck involved at all, I don't believe, in terms of, you know, your setbacks that you've had and your drive and determination to get where you want to be. And obviously playing nationally, playing internationally, a lot of that comes down to travel. And I know we've got a lot of people on this call that are playing regionally and, you know, no doubt in a couple of years giving everyone a run for their money and playing nationally. How do you think they can sort of, have you got any advice about how they can prepare themselves for like the amount of travel that that is? And sort of, have you got any pre-match or post-match like advice if people are traveling as much as they're going to be to obviously be playing netball or whatever sport it's going to be for them?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. You know, at the moment, I think the traveling is probably part of is the hardest part of things. What I would say is sleep is massive, particularly for me. You know, I've got to be getting my sleep in, or if I don't feel like I've had enough, it's being prepared. And it's, if you feel like you need to fit a nap in beforehand, get yourself organised and arrange a 20-minute little nap. Your food, your nutrition, that is, you know, if you know you've got a long car journey home or bus journey home, be prepared. You've got to have your snacks, you've got to refuel, but refuel with the right things. And then I would also say, you know, in terms of what is going to keep you occupied when you've got these long car journeys, is it that you want to focus on, you know, I've done some video analysis on the bus, and that's helped me just really focus in. Is it that if you're on a bus, we can quite often play some games, get some music on, just get the vibe, just nice and right, nice and prepared, just good energy going to and from the venue. But I would say that kind of sleep, nutrition, trying to find the right energy to get you zoned in, but also the energy nice and high, because I appreciate that it can be so fatiguing going and traveling, but it's I think just connecting with one another as well, because you won't be the only one that's feeling like that.
Mm-hmm. And a bit of a fun one to finish, Claire, from me, and obviously a difficult question probably to answer. So taking your own team out the equation on this one, who would you say is the team to beat this season?
Oh, Team Bath, 100%. Yeah, yes. I would say it. I think if they don't win it this year, I don't think they ever will. I know. That's strong. It's very strong. Yes, yeah.
Thank you so much, Claire. Awesome.
Pleasure.
Yeah, Claire, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I mean, you know, an amazingly busy person, incredibly well organized. So thank you so much, you know, for making the time.